usually comes up.
Oh, the icon didn't come up, but the
No.
voice did. Could you hear the voice? So it's all started.
Okay. All right. Yeah. We begin each session with the intention to be fully present, with a specific internal attitude. And this is described by Ibn Arabi as: we empty our hearts of reflective thinking, and we sit together with the real in remembrance, on the carpet of spiritual courtesy, adab, attentiveness, muraqabah, and presence, hudur, and readiness to receive whatever comes to us from him, so that it is the real who takes charge of our instruction by way of unveiling and realization. So when their hearts and powers of concentration have turned to God and taken refuge in him alone, and have cast out of them whatever else is clinging to them, of pretension, investigation, rational observation, and intellectual conclusions, then their minds are secure and at peace, and their hearts are purified and empty. And this state of preparedness is in them. The real reveals himself to them as the teacher, and this witnessing informs them of the meanings of these reports and words in a single outpouring. Right, this presentation is on the wisdom of opening in the word of Saleh, and I'll just bring up. Okay, this is the way the presentation, of the main points of the presentation.
Are you sharing the screen?
Oh, I thought I was sharing. Let's just
So you
try
put
that.
it up before and then it went down again, Bob.
Okay, let's do it again. Share screen.
Hmm.
There we go. Share.
Ah,
Okay.
yes,
Yes, you've got it.
perfect.
Okay. The chapter on Saleh, the wisdom of opening, is one of the shortest in the Fusus. It consists of an introductory poem, and Dr. Austin has formatted the following text into 6 paragraphs. The perplexing thing for me was how the introductory poem relates to the text following it. Even after multiple readings, the text appears to have little to do with the poem. Yet we know, for Ibn Arabi, a poem is usually a pithy, esoteric summary of what follows. After mentioning paths, riding beasts, and traversing trackless wastes, none of these are referred to again. But before we get into the poem and text, some background on the Prophet Saleh is needed. He was of the tribe of Samud, who came in time around 200 years after the people of Ad, who were the people of the prophethood. And he's mentioned 10 times in the Quran. Knowing the story of Saleh's miracles, or Saleh's miracle, is important for the understanding of the chapter. Now, the miracle story of Saleh. The Prophet Saleh admonished his people, "O my people, worship Allah. You have no deity other than him. He has produced you from the earth and settled you in it. So ask forgiveness of him and then repent to him. Indeed, my Lord is near and responsive." Hud 1161. They replied, "O Saleh, you were among us a man of promise before this. Do you forbid us to worship what our fathers worshipped? And indeed, we are in disquieting doubt about that to which you invite us." It's Hud 1162. And the leaders of the tribe demanded Saleh manifest a miracle to confirm he was truly a prophet. They asked that he make a she-camel, 10 months pregnant, issue from a large rock on the mountain. So Saleh gathered the people together, went to the mountain, prayed to God, and the rock split open and a gigantic she-camel came forth. After giving birth to its calf, it produced a lot of milk, feeding many people. But the camel would drink all the water from the well in the town on every alternate day. People complained she drank too much water and frightened other animals, so the disbelievers killed her, and then challenged Saleh to have God punish them. The prophet warned a great punishment would be upon them within 3 days, hoping his people would realize their mistake and repent. They didn't, and were killed after a period of 3 days, during which their faces changed color. Now let's look at the poem which opens the chapter. Among his signs are the riding beasts. A riding beast such as a camel or horse is something one gets onto when one wants to travel, and each mount has its particular way of moving and is chosen according to the road one is going to travel on. A camel is more suitable for traveling in the desert due to its ability to go a long time without fodder or water. A riding beast can also be viewed in a more imaginative way as an act through which a person is brought to God, viewing the journey as a journey to God. So is like a symbol of spiritual aspiration, hima. Each person has a particular mount, and the expression of his or her spiritual aspiration determines a particular gait of the riding beast. Or another way of framing this is the acts of a person reflect the Lord of their essential inclination. Because of the variety of the path, each path is suitable for a particular mount. And the reason for the variety of mounts is due to the differences in the types of path. There is as many ways to God as there are names of God. So if we view the riding beast as being an act taking the Gnostic towards God, then paths can be viewed as the names of God upon which they travel. The body can be viewed as a mount, and that mounted on it regarded as the speaking nafs, the human spirit. Ibn Arabi then speaks of those who follow the true course, while others go into trackless wastes. The former he sees as possessing true vision. Now, what does he mean by true course? On the face of it, it's a path to God. But what does this mean, as each path is different? There's a passage in the Futuhat in chapter 31, entitled The Company of Riders, which helps in understanding what Ibn Arabi regards as the true course or straight path. The status of those belonging to this group is very high. In it, he says, these riders renounce movement of themselves. In other words, they sit motionless on their beast, allowing it to carry them, so they expend no effort. The path they travel on is of submission. Ibn Arabi says their customary speech, that is, their perpetual invocation, is, there is no power or strength save through God. And their verse, that is their sign, you did not throw when you threw, but it was God who threw. Therefore it is said to them, you did not traverse those tracts when you traversed them, but it was the mounts who traversed them. If we view riding beasts as symbolizing spiritual effort, and the path travelled as the name of God travelled, then what is being said is that the Gnostics abide with the acts of their Lord, which is the name of God they are travelling on, not their own acts. Others who ride according to their own intelligences and acts have missed the way. Another translation in the White Fusus renders this line as those who cut distances into deserts of wilderness. The final lines of the poem are, to both there come from God, revelations of inner realities from every side. By inner realities, Ibn Arabi is referring to the fixed potentialities, the ayn al-sabita. In the 29 pages, a summary of Ibn Arabi's metaphysics, he calls the divine names the causes of the universe, which as names of the Godhead demand by their nature logical correlatives, which can only be found in the manifestation in the world. And he calls the ayn al-sabita the logical correlatives of the divine names, as well as being potential essences. Ibn Arabi also calls the ayn al-sabita the keys of the unseen, a key being something which opens that which is closed. One can envisage the mountain opening to reveal the camel, so the story of Saleh's miracle is a very suitable narrative to depict the manifestation of the name opener. Both groups receive what they deserve, but the outcome for the first group is better, as their essential nature accords with it. Let's now go to the following text and come to the first piece, which is to do with the creative command. Here, Ibn Arabi asserts the first degree is based on unevenness, by which he means oddness, and in which he says triplicity is implicit. So he's asserting the first degree of singularity, that is the number one, is threeness. God says, when we wish a thing, we only say to it be, and it is. This coming into being, Ibn Arabi explains in terms of true triplicities, one reflecting the other. The one expressing God is comprised of a trinity of essence, will, and word. The other, that is of the reflected world, comprised also of three things: its latent essence in its state of non-existence, its ayn al-sabita, its hearing of the will, and its obedience in obeying the command be. So the three aspects of the creature correspond to the three in the creator. It's like a reflection. The bringing into existence of the thing is established already. There's no process of creation, just as there is no process when your image is reflected in a mirror. The created being is brought into being by its own self, but through the reality in the reality. Ibn Arabi writes in the last few lines of the first paragraph on page 141, in truth, it was none other than the thing itself that brought itself into being from non-existence when the command was given. He then gives the example of the servant standing in accordance with the order of his master. The action of rising, whether it is fast, slow, etc., remains with the servant. The action of rising is only attributable to the master insofar as the order came from him. If the servant in getting up stumbles, that can't be attributed to the order to stand up. How the order is carried out depends on the servant. The power of bringing into being is part of God's self-disclosure. the holiest emanation of Fusus al Hikam, while the fact of its coming into being, the servant standing up, results from its hearing God's command, which is actualized through the holy emanation, the Fusus al Hikam. So he is saying creation belongs to the thing itself conforming to the word be. The only thing God does in the matter is to will the thing to be concretely manifested. God creates manifestation by allowing the ayin al-sabita their own inclination. Because if there was creation in the sense that it is normally understood, there would be a change in God, there would be movement, and he would be something he was not before. So we have a mystery, which is the following text does not seem to relate to the poem. So why is the poem there? The poem draws our attention to the true Gnostic's lack of lordship, one who does not follow his own path, but that of his Lord, and who allows his riding beast to do the travelling. He is established in servanthood and has little or nothing to do with travelling itself, which is done by the mount. He is required to look after it, whilst allowing God to guide it. And we can view the mount as a body and the rider as a human spirit. If the Gnostic has no lordship, being dependent on his mount to take him wherever he is travelling, acts can't be attributed to him, but must be attributed to the riding beast, which we have related to the Ionis Habitat, which travels the road of the divine names. The true Gnostic is aware that in reality it is God who is both the guide and the path. Now, I want briefly to discuss the relationship to the preceding chapter, because in all this, the poem seems to have much more in common with the previous chapter on Hud, where he talks of all things walking on the straight paths of their Lord, following according to a certain determination, being held by their forelocks, etc. Without going into Hud in detail, we note that Ibn Arabi says twice in the final paragraphs of Hud, "Wheresoever you turn, there is the face of God," making it clear he is in every direction and in everything. The fourth poem in the chapter of Hud, on page 136, sums up the matter. The eye perceives naught but him, only he is determined by himself. We are his, by him we exist, and by him we are governed. And we are in his presence at all times and all states. In reality, there is no path to be travelled, no movement, as a destination is the same spot as the beginning, only viewed in a different way, seen with God's eye. So what I'm suggesting is that it's as if the poem can best be viewed as a continuation of the word of Hud, which is the wisdom of unity. So if so, why does the poem commence the word of Saleh, which is to do with the wisdom of opium? Now, let's talk about another miracle story. We know very little about Saleh, other than he asked God for a miracle and it happened. But we do know a great deal more about another saint who performed a comparable miracle, and we know about his spiritual state. I'm referring to a passage in the Ruhr al-Quds, the Sufis of Andalusia, where Ibn Arabi relates a similar miracle story. That is, where the miracle was performed by God at the request of a saint, also in respect of an opening. In this case, the opening of the sky. It is told of his first teacher, Abu Jafar al-Irani, who was living in Seville at the time. Someone came and begged him to go to the fortress of Kudama, as the people there were in desperate need of rain. Despite there being the sea and an 8-day journey over land between Seville and the fortress, the saint travelled there, prayed for rain, and we are told God sent rain within the hour. A person suggested that it would surely be sufficient if al-Irani prayed for rain without travelling to the fortress. But he responded God had commanded him to go in person. An intriguing comment is made by the disciple who accompanied him, who in another version of the story is Ibn Arabi himself. That rain fell on all sides of them, but not a drop touched them. He asked his master why this was so, and al-Irani replied it would have done so if only he had remembered when they were at the fortress. See to the Fantasia, page 64. Now we're getting on to Saleh station. From what has been narrated, we know some Gnostics who are at a particular spiritual station can ask God for miracles, and they will occur. The miracle story of Saleh is about a request for an opening, and the mountain opening for the camel, and in the case of al-Irani, the sky for rain. I believe the reason the poem was placed at the beginning of Saleh and not at the end of the chapter on Hud is because Ibn Arabi wants us to relate the poem to the miracle story of Saleh's camel. The poem tells us something of the degree of those saints who can ask God for miracles by not being themselves when they pray, as in, you did not throw. Recall, this is the sign manifested in the chapter entitled The Company of Riders, mentioned earlier. I surmise this can only happen after a particular wisdom has been realized. In this case, the wisdom of unity, which is the word of Hud, the way of Hud. So the commencement of Saleh is a perfect place for a poem about those whose acts are not their own. Recall the request for a miracle came from Saleh's people, not himself. To further support this view, I'll also refer to a hadith which Ibn Arabi is fond of quoting, part of which goes, and my servant does not cease to approach me with supererogatory acts until I love him. And when I love him, I become his hearing with which he hears, his sight with which he sees, his hand with which he grasps, and his foot with which he walks. The next part of the hadith is not usually quoted, but it goes on. And if he asks me for something, I give it to him. It's from Divine Sayings on page 17. There is another hadith, this time about Uwais al-Qurani. The context of the hadith is another matter, the Malamiyah. But in it, the Prophet says about Uwais, if he invokes God with an oath, his oath will assuredly be verified. It's important to appreciate just what a great miracle story this would have been regarded at the time. Out of inanimate rock, a flesh and blood creature came forth. It's not a case of a saint creating by his himma. or transporting a camel from there to here, similar to what the jinn offered to do in the story of Bilqis's throne, or of the recreation of the throne in Solomon's palace, as Asif ibn Bakaria did. This was a manifestation coming from God in response to a request from a saint. Let's go to the order of the chapters now. I have suggested the introductory poem is a culmination of the previous chapter of the Wisdom of Hud. Ibn Arabi says that the wisdom of Saleh follows that of Hud in the Fusus, because the oneness of lordship, which is what the chapter of Hud is about, results in the opening of the absurdity of uniqueness. Accordingly, it is a poem about those who have realized the oneness of lordship, which opens the chapter, because in the miracle story of Saleh, there is an opening, the mountain opening for the she-camel. Let's now move on to look at the rest of the chapter. Proof by logic. After the first two paragraphs of text, Ibn Arabi goes on to expand on the coming into being of a thing. We are on page 142, in the paragraph starting, for example. This and the following paragraph are about the bringing into being of meanings by logical proof. This particular type of proof, known as a syllogism, is a form of reasoning in which a conclusion is drawn from two given premises. A common term, known as a middle term, being present in the two premises, but not in the conclusion. Another way of understanding the term is by envisaging a production of an offspring by the coupling of terms. Dr. Austin translated what Ibn Arabi wrote without explanatory notes, but an understanding of what Ibn Arabi seems to be getting at in the two paragraphs is easier by way of examples. To put it simply, we have two premises, each premise containing two terms, so four terms altogether. However, one of these terms is repeated in the two premises in order to connect one of them to the other. Ibn Arabi gives the example, every originated thing has a cause. This is the first premise in which we have two terms, the word originated, which is term one, and the word cause, term two. The second premise is the cosmos is originated. So we have the terms cosmos and originated, term three being the cosmos. The word originated is a repeated term mentioned in both premises. As it's common to both premises, we can come to the conclusion the cosmos has a cause. Another example, we take the term, this is a man, so which is the first premise, containing the terms this and the term man. And then all men are animals, the second premise, containing the terms men and animals. And we come to the conclusion, this is an animal. Conclusion containing the terms this and animal. Ibn Arabi brings in the concept of creation by proof, that is syllogistic reasoning, to reinforce his statement that the origin of all becoming is simplicity, to show that it is true in abstract or mental premises as well as in metaphysical. We are now at the bottom of page 142, at the paragraph starting the origin of all becoming. Just as the origin of all becoming is threeness, so God manifested threeness in delaying the destruction of Saleh's people for 3 days. Ibn Arabi attributes this time span to Saleh's awareness of the notion of triplicity. Recall, it was Saleh who said the disbelievers had 3 days to repent. There is also triplicity manifest in the colouring of the faces of the disbelievers prior to their deaths. So we have yellow representing the shining of the faces of the blessed, red representing the laughter of the blessed, laughter being the cause of redness in the face, and black, the Arabic word for joyous, being similar to that of a black skin colour. Corresponding to each colour is also the manifestation of damnation. God spoke a word to them, that is, there was a sound, and the effect of that tiding had a threefold effect on their skin. The same colour being signalled on the faces of the blessed and the damned. He said, their Lord brings them glad tidings of mercy from him and his good pleasure, in the case of the blessed, and brings them tidings of a painful punishment with regard to the damned. The word was the same to each party, those who were saved and those who were destroyed. What was manifest to them in the outward aspect was the inner effect of the word. Ibn Arabi says they affected themselves just as they came into being of themselves in obedience to the divine command. In the final paragraph, Ibn Arabi is saying the reality of everything is in the knowledge of God. So things we say happen are actually already established. God does not give to people except what their reality or ayan al-sabta require. Good and evil come to the servant only from himself, herself. If one is aware of this knowledge, suffering changes to become in keeping with one's nature, and so becomes changed to mercy. Recall he has said earlier that creation belongs to the thing itself, conforming to the word being, and also with regard to the faces of the blessed and the damned, that they affect themselves. Thank you for your attention.
Oh, Bob, thank you so much for your presentation. I'm sure that people will have questions, and now is the time for those questions to come up. Do you agree, Bob, or do you have any final comments you want to make?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
I'll just try and bring up the screen where I can see people's faces.
Okay.
Let's see.